The air buzzed with activity, people rushed to and fro, suitcases rolled across the polished floor.
At a small coffee stand, a young man waited patiently.
His name was David. He was heading home after a long business trip. David checked his watch. The bus would be leaving soon. He hoped to grab a quick coffee before then. Just then, a young woman hurried past. Her bag brushed against David, knocking his coffee to the ground. The bustling bus station was filled with people rushing to their destinations, and in the midst of this chaos, the coffee cup tumbled, spilling its contents all over the pavement.
Oh my goodness, I am so sorry, I didn't see you there. Are you okay?
The young woman exclaimed. She had bright eyes and a worried frown. Her face was flushed with embarrassment as she looked at the mess she had inadvertently caused. David looked down at his spilled coffee. He couldn't help but smile. Despite the inconvenience, he found the situation somewhat amusing. It was just a coffee after all.
It's all right, no harm done. Really, it's just a coffee, don't worry about it.
The woman pulled out some tissues from her bag, her hands shaking slightly. She bent down trying to clean up the mess, her face still a picture of concern.
Let me buy you another coffee. Please, it's the least I can do.
She insisted. David hesitated for a moment. He appreciated her offer, but he was also in a hurry to catch his bus. The thought of missing it made him anxious.
That's very kind of you, but I should probably just run for my bus. Maybe another time, he said with a smile before turning to dash towards his bus. The young woman watched him go, still holding the tissues, a small smile playing on her lips as she hoped their paths might cross again.
Oh right, silly me. What bus are you taking? I always get confused with these schedules.
David told her his destination, mentioning that he was heading to a small town a few hours away. To his surprise, they were both heading to the same town. It was such an unexpected coincidence.
What a coincidence. I'm Sarah, by the way. It's always nice to meet a fellow traveler.
David introduced himself, feeling a sense of camaraderie with Sarah. As they waited for their bus, they chatted about their lives, sharing stories and experiences. They discovered they both loved to read and had a shared passion for photography. They exchanged book recommendations and talked about their favorite photo spots. Time flew by as they talked and laughed together, realizing how much they had in common. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Soon their bus arrived, its brakes hissing as it came to a stop. The doors swung open with a familiar creak, signaling the end of their shared journey.
This is my stop, Sarah said, her voice tinged with a mix of reluctance and resolve.
Sarah said, a hint of disappointment in her voice. David felt it too, a pang of sadness that their conversation was coming to an end. He had really enjoyed their conversation, the way they effortlessly connected over shared stories and laughter.
It was lovely meeting you, Sarah. David's voice was warm, carrying the sincerity of his words.
You too, David. Sarah's smile was genuine, though tinged with a hint of wistfulness. Maybe we'll bump into each other again sometime. Her words hung in the air, a hopeful possibility.
David's heart skipped a beat at the thought. The idea of seeing Sarah again filled him with unexpected joy.
I'd like that. His response was immediate, his eyes reflecting his eagerness. Here, let me give you my number. David quickly scribbled his number on a piece of paper, his hands slightly trembling with excitement.
They exchanged numbers quickly as other passengers boarded the bus, the hustle and bustle around them a stark contrast to their quiet moment. With a final wave goodbye, David watched as Sarah found her seat. He smiled to himself, feeling a warmth spread through him. What a sweet encounter to brighten up a tiring journey. He couldn't help but feel that this was the start of something special. He looked forward to seeing where their paths might lead them next, the possibilities endless and exciting.
Welcome back to Learn and Talk English. You guys already saw the story video, so we're not going to go over the plot again. Instead, we are going to pick apart all the cool vocabulary and phrases that we can learn. Think of it as a shortcut to sounding more natural and fluent.
That's right. We're going to pull out some of the most interesting vocabulary and phrases so you can make them your own.
Exactly. Okay, so the story starts us off at a bustling bus station, right?
Yeah.
It's described as buzzing with activity, with people rushing to and fro across this polished floor. What stands out to you about this?
I think all those details really work together to create a sensory experience for the listener. You can almost hear the sounds, see the movement, even feel the smooth floor. It's a great example of how just a few well-chosen words can really transport you right into the scene.
Yeah. I feel like I'm right there watching it all unfold.
Right.
Speaking of unfolding, things take a bit of a turn when our main character, David, gets bumped into while waiting for his coffee.
Oh, yeah.
The story uses the phrase brushed against to describe that moment of contact and then, bam, knocking his coffee to the ground.
Brushed against. It's so subtle but effective. It emphasizes the accidental nature of the bump as opposed to a full-on collision. And then following it up with that sharp active verb knocking really highlights the suddenness and the clumsiness of the whole thing.
Yes.
You instantly get that oh no moment.
Yeah.
And the story doesn't let up on the sensory details. The woman is flushed with embarrassment, and her face is a picture of concern.
I love those details. They add so much depth to the woman's reaction. You know, going beyond just a simple, I'm sorry.
Right.
Flushed in particular, it's so evocative, isn't it? It just paints this vivid picture of her physical response to the embarrassment. You know she's mortified.
Yeah. It makes me wonder if there's a cultural element to that phrase, too. Is flushed with embarrassment a common way to express that feeling in English-speaking cultures? Well, that's interesting. I think you could argue that it is. It definitely leans into that tendency in English to understate strong emotions sometimes. It's not as dramatic as saying, I want it to disappear, but it gets the point across in a more subtle way.
I see what you mean. It's like saying, I'm a little bit flustered, when you really want to scream into a pillow.
Exactly.
But getting back to the story, I'm curious about David's reaction.
Yeah.
Instead of getting upset, he couldn't help but smile and found the situation somewhat amusing.
Yeah,
It's such a contrast to the woman's mortification.
absolutely. And that contrast is what makes the scene so charming. Couldn't help but smile is such a great phrase.
Right.
It reveals a lot about David's personality. He comes across as laid back, easygoing, maybe even a bit amused by the whole chaotic situation.
It definitely adds a layer of humor to the scene.
Yeah.
And it plunges into that classic saying, it's just a spilled coffee, don't cry over spilled milk.
Exactly. There's a sense of acceptance and lightheartedness in his reaction. He doesn't dwell on the inconvenience at all. And it's further emphasized by his comment, no harm done.
Right. No harm done. It's almost like a mini mantra for staying calm in these unexpected situations. It's such a useful phrase.
I agree. It's a great way to diffuse a potentially awkward moment and signal that you're not letting a small mishap ruin your day.
Okay, so we've got this flustered woman and this unfazed David. But she's determined to make things right. She insists on buying him another coffee, saying, let me buy you another coffee, please. It's the least I can do.
This exchange highlights a common social dance in many English-speaking cultures, I think. When you make a mistake, even a small one, there's often an impulse to offer some kind of reparation. It's a way of restoring balance, showing sincerity.
Right.
And in this case, it sets the stage for something much more interesting to unfold.
Yes. And that's where we're going to leave things for now.
But don't worry, we'll be back soon to unpack the next part of the story and uncover even more linguistic gems.
In the meantime, I encourage you to watch the video again, paying close attention to these phrases. See if you can spot any other interesting language choices.
And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world of English. Welcome back to our deep dive. So when we left off, a spilled coffee had turned into an unexpected opportunity for connection.
It's amazing how these little things can lead to something much bigger.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is where the story really starts to highlight the power of language to build rapport. Remember how the woman, Sarah, introduces herself?
Yeah.
She says, I'm Sarah, by the way. It's always nice to meet a fellow traveler.
Right.
Such a simple phrase, but it speaks volumes.
I was wondering if we could dig into that a little bit more. What makes fellow traveler so effective here?
Well, on the surface level, it's just acknowledging that they're both at a bus station, right? About to embark on journeys. But I think it goes deeper than that. It subtly creates this sense of shared experience, a common ground that instantly breaks down social barriers.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like saying, we're in this together.
Exactly. And it kind of suggests that they might have more in common than just their immediate destination. It's an invitation to explore those possibilities.
Right, which is exactly what they proceed to do. They discover this shared passion for photography.
Right.
I love how the story uses that word passion. It really conveys their enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And they start exchanging book recommendations. Suddenly, time flew by as they were realizing how much they had in common.
Time flew by is such a classic idiom for expressing how engrossed you are in something, you know?
Yeah.
It emphasizes the effortless flow of the conversation, how they're just completely absorbed in getting to know each other.
Yeah.
And that phrase, realizing how much they had in common, it hints at the deeper connection that's forming between them.
It reminds me of those times when you meet someone and you click.
Yeah.
And the conversation just flows so naturally.
Right.
And before you know it, hours have passed.
That's exactly the feeling the story is trying to evoke. And it's all achieved through those subtle language choices. It's not explicitly stated that they're falling for each other, but the reader kind of gets that sense through the way their interactions are described.
Right. This brings us to an interesting point. The power of implication in language.
Yes.
The story doesn't spell everything out for us.
Right.
It relies on these carefully chosen words and phrases to create a sense of atmosphere and emotion.
You're absolutely right. And that's what makes it so engaging for the reader. We're invited to read between the lines, to fill in the gaps with our own interpretations and experiences.
So let's talk about that moment when their connection is interrupted.
Yeah.
Sarah's stop arrives and she says, "This is my stop," with a hint of disappointment in her voice.
Yeah.
What do you make of that phrase, a hint of disappointment?
It's a beautiful example of how just a single word can add so much complexity to a character's emotions. It suggests that Sarah's genuinely sad to see the conversation end, which hints at a deeper level of connection than just a casual chat. It also creates a sense of anticipation, leaving the reader wondering if this is truly goodbye or just like a pause in their story.
Yeah. And David clearly feels it too.
Yeah.
The story tells us he feels a pang of sadness as their conversation comes to an end. Pang is such a strong word.
Yeah.
It conveys a sharp, almost physical sensation of loss.
I think it perfectly captures that bittersweet feeling of saying goodbye to someone you've enjoyed spending time with. And it's made even more poignant by the fact that they've only just met. There's a sense of what if hanging in the air, a feeling that their connection could have blossomed into something more if they'd had more time.
Right. But then comes that glimmer of hope. They exchange numbers. David quickly scribbled his number on a piece of paper, his hand slightly trembling with excitement. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about his state of mind.
That detail is so brilliant. It reveals so much without explicitly stating it. We see David's nervousness, his eagerness to stay connected with Sarah, and that trembling hand. It hints at the depth of his feelings. He's not just being polite, he's genuinely interested.
And then as Sarah finds her seat on the bus, David watches her go, feeling a warmth spread through him. What a lovely way to end the scene. What stands out to you about that final image?
It's a subtle but powerful image of hope. The warmth suggests a feeling of comfort and happiness, a sense that something good has come from this chance encounter. It leaves the reader with this sense of optimism, a feeling that this might be just the beginning of their story.
And that's where we'll leave things for now, with a lingering feeling of warmth and anticipation. But don't worry, we're not done yet.
We'll be back soon to wrap up our deep dive into the language of this delightful story. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Learn and Talk English. We're wrapping up our deep dive into the language of chance encounters and unexpected connections.
It's been fun breaking this story down. It's amazing how it uses language to create this vivid experience.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's a good reminder that even simple language can be so powerful when used well.
Okay, so for our final analysis, let's rewind back to that first encounter at the coffee stand. What stands out to you about how the story sets the scene?
Well, I really like how it uses sound and movement to create a sense of place. Remember those opening lines? The bus station buzzed with activity, a symphony of rumbling engines, shuffling feet, and distant announcements. People rush to and fro, their suitcases rolling across the polished floor. It feels like you're right there.
Yeah, you can practically hear the echoes and feel the energy of the crowd.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how those sensory details can really bring a story to life.
For sure. And amidst all that chaos is David patiently waiting for his coffee.
Yeah.
It's a nice contrast.
It makes that moment when Sarah bumps into him even more jarring. It describes her as knocking his coffee to the ground with a clatter that seemed to echo through the entire station. It's like this sudden shift in energy.
Right. That's such a clever use of sound to emphasize how unexpected the collision was. It breaks the rhythm and draws your attention to the moment.
Yeah, and then we have Sarah's reaction. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. Her face is flushed with embarrassment and she starts apologizing like crazy.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how the story uses different ways to show her embarrassment.
Yeah.
Through her words and her physical reactions, flushed is such a strong visual word. It really shows you how flustered and self-conscious she feels.
It's like a universal symbol of embarrassment, no matter what language or culture you're from.
I think that's true. And it's made even stronger by her apologies. It shows how bad she feels and her desire to make things right, which is pretty normal in most cultures.
Yeah. Speaking of social responses, I'm curious about Sarah insisting on buying David another coffee. "Let me buy you another coffee, please," she pleads. "It's the least I can do." It's more than just being polite.
I think so too. I think it's a way for her to get back a sense of balance after messing up his day. It's also a chance to keep talking to him, which she obviously wants to do.
And that, I think, is the turning point of the story. What could have just been an awkward moment turns into something way more meaningful.
Oh, I love that. It really shows how chance and random luck is woven throughout the whole story. And it all comes back to language, the way they use words to get past that awkwardness, find things they have in common, show they're interested in each other. It's all so well done.
It's a master class in conversation, sprinkled with those perfect vocab words that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that every interaction can be special, even if it's short or seems small.
So there you have it, everyone. That's the end of our deep dive into this story. I hope you enjoyed learning about all these little details of the English language.
And remember, the best way to learn these phrases is to watch the video a few times. Pay attention to how they're used and then try them out yourself.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends who are learning English. Until next time, happy learning.